Audrey Marie Santa was born in December of 1983. She had a tragic accident when she was found in a pool on August 9th of 1987. And from that moment, as she left the hospital, her family moved to 64 South Flag Street. And many amazing and miraculous things surrounded Audrey. And so over time, the people that came looking for prayers for Audrey to get close to her, that they could get close to Christ, the family converted the garage into a chapel. And so over the course of years, many people came to the chapel to be able to know, left devotional items, came here to say the rosary, to be able to pray, and to be able to ask for Audrey's prayers as well. For many years, and some of our pilgrims who have been here before will remember the chapel looking in many ways like this here. But the lighting continued to be poor, and also because of the way that the sanctuary, the space around the altar with the tabernacle had been configured, it made for a limited number of visitors to be able to be here. And so as more people have desired to come to be able to pray here and to accommodate the growing need of pilgrims, in December of 2018 and in the early months of 2019, the chapel was renovated. And then on March 15th, 2019, Bishop McManus came to be able to celebrate and bless the chapel. In December of 2018 and the early months of 2019, after a need to be able to improve the lighting, we also made some renovations to the chapel. On March 15th, Bishop McManus, our bishop in Worcester, came to be able to bless the chapel in its newly configured arrangement. And so what we want to do now is, because we have closed the chapel during the pandemic, is to give people a tour of the chapel, since they're not able to come in for normal visitation. The first thing that you come in, and behind the door that you enter, is this particular shrine for Audrey, where people are invited to be able to light a battery-operated candle. We can't have an open flame here because of fire laws, but there is the prayer that Father Rene Laurentin wrote for Audrey's canonization that has received an imprimatur from Bishop McManus, some details of her life, and of course a picture of Audrey so that people can pray to her and ask her intercession here in the chapel of her house. To the right of the chapel, of this particular shrine, is an image that was left. You'll notice that the painting on the wall is different from the rest of the chapel. It's the original buff color that the chapel was painted in. And that's because there's an image of oil that miraculously appeared one day, and that was left because it tells the story of Audrey and of her accident. And so as we pull up the lights to be able to give you a little bit of a better view, you'll see that at the very top is the Sacred Heart. And you'll see just beneath the Sacred Heart, there is a small disc of oil. It actually is a perfect circle if we were to lift the tapestry. And then if you see that as a circle that would be a host, you would recognize that underneath that, and superimposed on the image of the Last Supper, is a stain in oil that actually is the shape of a chalice. Above the head of our Lord is the cup of the chalice, and then it comes to a point, not obliterating our Lord or the faces of his disciples, and then below them it extends itself again as the base of the chalice. And then under that, the base of the chalice actually has what would look like a tail to it. But if you look at the bottom section, you realize that the bottom half of the chalice, with the extension of oil underneath it, actually is reminiscent of the mushroom cloud from the atomic bombs. So if to remember that Audrey's accident on August 9th is the same date that the second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki in Japan. To realize that the target at the time was the largest building in Nagasaki was a Roman Catholic church, and that church stood on Santo Street. The bomb was dropped at 11:03 in the morning, which is the same time that Audrey's call was registered with the EMTs to be able to come and retrieve her from the pool, excuse me. So here, miraculously appearing in oil, is an image that tells the story of the Lord's mercy and forgiveness that comes from his heart through his flesh and blood in the Eucharist, and then leads us to know the mercy of God and the image of Saint Faustina of divine mercy that is beneath that. As we move around the chapel, you'll see again images and mementos that were given to Audrey through her life. First, there is an image here of St. Nicholas, who we would know today as Santa Claus. Above him are two wooden statues of Elijah the prophet and Moses holding the Ten Commandments. This is the symbols of the Old Testament that appeared with our Lord at the time of the Transfiguration on the top of the mountain. Next is an image that was hand-painted as a gift to Audrey of Our Lady of Lourdes. Above that is an image of the Eucharist, a chalice with the host, grapes and wheat, and to the side is the Sacred Heart and the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Next to that are two images. The top one is of Blessed Charlie Rodriguez, a Catholic layman who was a Knight of Columbus, who died of cancer in the early 1970s from Puerto Rico, who was a great Catholic layman as a catechist and a great lover of the Lord. Beneath him is actually a picture of Saint Teresa of Lisieux before she entered the convent. Many people know her as Teresa the Little Flower. Beneath that is an image of Saint Clare holding a monstrance. It was Clare who, when the Saracens were attacking Assisi, and her sisters asked her to flee the convent to find shelter in the walls of the city of Assisi, she refused. She told them that she had promised her Lord that she would not leave. And so in turn, she placed the Blessed Sacrament in the window, telling the Lord that she would keep her promise and he needed to keep hers. And when the Blessed Sacrament was placed in the window, the Saracens turned and fled and never attacked the city of Assisi. It was spared. So Clare, with the famous saint of Assisi, Francis, are the two patrons of that city. Going along, we see other images that were gifts to Audrey from different people, again, favorite saints' images of our Lord. In the middle is an image of Padre Pio. You'll notice that if you look more carefully that it looks like it's been stained, and it has. At various times over the years, this particular image has wept oil. There's no glass or covering, and so the oil just comes down out of the paper, stains it, but it never deteriorates or destroys the image. And so Padre Pio is one of the patron saints of the cause for Audrey to be able to be a saint. Next to Padre Pio, the nun is actually Saint Edith Stein, or Benedicta of the Cross, who was murdered in Auschwitz because she was Jewish by birth, converted and became a Carmelite nun. And the day of her murder in the concentration camp in Auschwitz was August 9th. One of the miracles that was able to make Saint Benedicta a saint was actually a close family friend of Audrey's, the child of Father Charlie and Mary McCarthy. Above that is, next to that is the image of the Sacred Heart. Below that is Juan Diego showing the tilma to Our Lady. And next to that, on the other side of the window, is a picture of the monstrance and of the Blessed Sacrament, and of Christ the King. Turning around, we see now this is the tabernacle that was in Audrey's room. That has been moved here so that patrons can be able to appreciate this and to be able to enjoy the same tabernacle that Audrey enjoyed in her room, to be able to pray to the Blessed Sacrament. With these in front of that, of course, is the altar of sacrifice, where we normally celebrate Mass for Audrey. To the right of the tabernacle are two things to take note of. There's an image of Christ, and around Christ there are individually framed pictures of each of the hosts that have bled here in Audrey's home. And then next to that is a picture of Saint Sharbel, Saint Sharbel is a blood relative of Audrey's, a saint who's very powerful and well known throughout Lebanon. And he is also one of our patrons for Audrey.